arrogance, with all due respect. Sometimes it's just anger. You are unable to convince enough Pakistanis that all we want is a good neighborly relationship.
But Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee came to Lahore in 1999 and went to the Minar-e-Pakistan.
Let me tell you, even long before that, Jawaharlal Nehru made a speech at the Aligarh Muslim University in early 1948 and said, we would not have accepted the idea of Pakistan if we did not want to be good friends with it. So I know that history. You know, I'm somebody who articulates that history to my countrymen. What I'm saying is that your leaders have failed to convince people in sufficient numbers. And our leaders have deliberately kept that ideology alive. So, for example, when people in Pakistan say, I've always said that we need to move beyond Kashmir to be able to have good relations, I'm told, no. Pakistan is incomplete without Kashmir. And I jokingly turn around and say, well, if we can live for 67 years without being complete, surely we can live another 67 years without being complete. Let's move on. Let's move forward. But if you see history, neighbors eventually come to terms with one another. Either you go the difficult route, Germany and France, from the 16th century all the way to the 20th century, middle of the 20th century, they fought many wars, and after many conflicts, they reached the conclusion that at the end of the day, we should have an arrangement in which we have free borders, where people move back and forth easily. Or you can have the easier route, Canada and the United States, who understood very early on that there was no need to compete. Pakistan, whatever we try to do, we will never be as big as India. And India will not be able to be, India is making considerable progress, many of us admire it, but India will never be fully comfortable without having a permanent peace with its neighbor.
But Mr. Menon, this whole idea, and we've been talking about open borders and liberalized visa regimes for the longest time. The awajahi of the people, the coming and going of the peoples of India and Pakistan. Is it practical? Why is it that when you were Foreign Secretary or National Security Advisor, I think did you try hard enough? What was the problem? Why did it happen?
Well, I think until you're comfortable that you're addressing the basic issues, security issues, other issues that you have, you're never going to have an open trading, open visa, open travel regime. I mean, that I think is... But, you know, just to go back to Husain's point, I think as a practitioner, my problem is that we have gone through our repetitive pattern of trying to improve relations and failed repeatedly. Today, in India, it's almost impossible to find a constituency. You have a young, aspirational population. They have other things to worry about. They're not interested. Apart from maybe Punjabs and their colonies like Delhi, the rest of, you know, India has other things to worry about.
But Mr. Menon, I hope you realize...
This is the problem, because I agree with you. There are very good reasons, selfish reasons from an Indian point of view, to actually work for better relations with Pakistan. I mean, the simple thing is, our fate today depends on the rest of the world much more than it ever did before.
Sure.
You look at our GDP, you look at the proportion of what we want a bigger role in the world, it makes sense to have a better relationship with our neighbor. You have to have a peaceful periphery if you want to develop, transform India, do the things that interest us. I'm not arguing against that at all, but I'm just saying that the constituency for that today has shrunk. So when you say Indian leaders must go and convey, Indian leaders are democratically elected. They will convey what they feel. Luckily, I think we have a generation. I was born after partition independence. You have a whole generation of Indians who have moved on, who are willing to look at it rationally. And I think we need to put the rational argument to them rather than the ideological argument.
But if much of India has moved on, Ambassador Menon, the fact is that Prime Minister Narendra Modi, barely 6 months ago, cancelled the Foreign Secretary level talks with Pakistan. Now, we didn't really get an answer to
but
why
we've
that
also
happened.
started
And we
them up
restarted
again.
that
We're
10
back
days
at
ago.
that tentative
So-
start of talks,
Yeah.
that
So what
phase
is it?
of the cycle.
So when you're saying that the rest of India is moving on, we have a very young population, India's
No, but
looking
if you look
outside and
at
elsewhere,
each
but you're
wave-
still obsessed with Pakistan.
You're not
What is
obsessed
this?
anymore.
What is
That's
this?
the whole point.
Okay.
That what we used to, each wave used to arouse tremendous popular enthusiasm. And you saw it in not just the media and schools. I remember in December 2004, we issued something like 30,000 visas to Pakistani school children to visit India during the holidays.
Okay.
Now, I'm not sure that today, even if you tried to do this, parents would think 3 times about sending their children across that border.
And by the way, I wouldn't blame them. I mean, on this one, I'm on your side, because if our courts take the attitude that they have done, letting people like Lakhvi off, while they continue to pursue vendettas against people like me, so I am certainly on your side on this argument, that there are actions that are taking place that do create resentment. Let me just point out that 85% of Pakistan's population is also post-partition. And in a recent article, I argued that young Pakistani population does not need an ideology to be Pakistani. For example, I was born a Pakistani.
Right.
All I'm interested in is Pakistan's prosperity. I do not need to constantly, I mean, as a student of history, I want to know what happened, and there can be many arguments. But what we have had in the subcontinent is that instead of trying to build a future, people have insisted on trying to invent history.
Okay.
And what we should be working on is, and in case of Pakistan, look, this whole militarized state we have created, the militant state we have created, has resulted in great setback to Pakistan.
So how would you describe today's Pakistan? I know you haven't been back for some years.
No, not some years, just 2 years. And,
2 years.
2 years is not 2 years is not a bad time, you know, and it's not that much has changed in 2 years.
Right, but
it may not change in another 5.
You did have a democratic election where Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif democratically won, and there was a democratic transfer of power. But over the last few months, we've seen how, especially after Peshawar, after the attacks in Peshawar in December, there seems to be some sort of a creeping coup in Pakistan. Would you agree?
Well, before I agree or disagree with that point, let me go back to an earlier point which you made, and you asked about the process of having foreign secretary level talks, cancelling them, then having them again. I would warn people here in Delhi in particular that there are many people here who are just prisoners of the process. Okay. Now I understand diplomats have a necessity of the process. And then the media, of course, because you need stories, each time there's interaction, you consider it a big story. So if you actually go through the newspaper files every 2-3 years, great breakthrough, then
No, so what was the point you were making?
So the point I was making was that the India-Pakistan relationship will need to be looked at in the longer-term perspective. And the longer-term perspective is, how is Pakistan dealing with its own identity? Pakistan is seen by a lot of countries in the world as a dysfunctional state. Our military has been disproportionately powerful in our politics.
Can I bring you to today's Pakistan? I know that you have written a lot about this. But in the light of the coup, in the light of the attacks in Peshawar, do you think that Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif is much more weakened? And
I think Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif is allowing the Pakistan Army Chief to go and conduct talks with the Afghan President and Chief Executive. I don't think it's the place of the Army Chief to be negotiating with foreign powers. I think the Army Chief should be responsible to the Prime Minister, and that by doing that, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has essentially indicated that the real power center in Pakistan is not in Islamabad, where Parliament is located, but in Rawalpindi, where the general headquarters are located. And as a Pakistani, I don't like that. I want my government to be run according to my country's constitution, which authorizes the elected leaders to make decisions about our country's foreign relations, including relations with India.
Mr. Menon, I was in Islamabad a few days ago, a week or so ago, and you hear in several quarters in Islamabad that that Nawaz Sharif ignored the informal advice of his own army and came to Delhi last May to participate in the swearing-in of Prime Minister Modi. And then you go, and then India sort of cancelled the Foreign Secretary level talks, and that undercut Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's peace constituency towards India.
Well,
what's your reaction to that?
Frankly, I can't answer for what happens in Pakistan.
No, but what is your analysis about?
I think our problem is, quite frankly, that we need an interlocutor, whoever it is. We have shown a willingness to deal with any kind of government in Pakistan, whether it was General Musharraf. We didn't get into, is this a legitimate government, is this an army government? We did business with each successive government in Pakistan. And I think that's the right way to go about it. Frankly, we have interests as India, and we need to chase those interests vis-a-vis Pakistan. It's for Pakistan to sort itself out and decide who runs Pakistan, who does what. That's not our business. Our problem is we are dealing with several, as you said, constituencies in Pakistan. You talk to civil society, you talk to businessmen, you talk to civilian democratic elected leaders, the army. They all have separate interests. There are extreme right fringe elements, various sorts of elements. Now, how do you deal with these? It's very hard to do a coherent policy in dealing with that. So you end up dealing with each one differently.
Would you agree? Would you say that it's very difficult to talk to all these various constituencies in Pakistan?
That's why I was trying to explain how Pakistan functions, and Pakistan's dysfunction is definitely a consideration in your foreign policy, and it ought to be.
So how do you break that? How do you break that dysfunction?
Maybe you can't break it. Maybe it's for us to break. Maybe you just need to wait.
Okay.
All I'm saying is, the reason why I was commenting on this process constituency, as I called it, there are some people that are just too eager. Here's a country that is relatively new, basically cut out of whole cloth, tremendous identity issues. Mr. Menon joked about or mentioned that only in Punjab there is a preoccupation with Pakistan. Pakistan's misfortune is that the majority of Pakistanis is Punjabis. So we can't escape the Punjabi obsession.
We are a good people.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. I'm from the oppressed minorities of Pakistan. So yes, we look at Punjabis differently. And that was just meant as a joke to a predominantly Punjabi audience. The point is that the Punjab in Pakistan has created an ideological paradigm for Pakistan. India is an eternal enemy, America is the check writer, and Islam is the national unifier. They do not allow the rest of us to debate issues and policies. So till we sort those things out, maybe the search for a breakthrough is where you are wrong.
Okay, so let me ask you the question.
Maybe there will be no breakthrough. Maybe all you should be focused on is specific issues. So for example, if you say that Pakistan freeing Lakhvi is a wrong thing, people like myself will join you and say, yes, you are saying the right thing, because Pakistan needs to fight all terrorists, and that should include terrorists that fight the Americans in Afghanistan, that fight against you and wage terrorism in India, and those terrorists who are waging war against the people of Pakistan, against the Shias of Pakistan, against the Barelvis of Pakistan, against